Thanks for joining our first Pike Network online seminar. We're hoping to have a lot more of these here in the future on a variety of topics. So we appreciate you being a part of the first one. Today we got Chris Daugherty, who is a 2004 initiate of the Delta Alpha chapter at George Washington University. He is a communications professional with 20 years experience, and in 2021 he founded his own boutique consultancy, Hydra Strategies. In 2025, he launched Early Career Development Coach with a focus on helping young professionals better articulate, quantify, and demonstrate their value to future employers. He's also the author of the book Unlock Your Professional Potential. His career and professional experience were shaped by his involvement in Pike. So, Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
So, you want to tell everyone a little bit more about yourself outside of what I shared?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I remember not being taken seriously by some employers out of college. One is a fraternity guy, one with not a whole lot of experience. And so ultimately through this and other engagements with local chapters I've been doing, really focused on helping college students and young professionals better sell themselves and succeed in roles. And so this really plays into it, and I really appreciate the opportunity. So I don't want to repeat a lot of what you said, but that's a quick about me and why I'm here.
Absolutely. Awesome. So a little housekeeping for our attendees. There is a Q&A feature in the top of the Teams meeting, so you should be able to drop questions in there. That's how we'll field anything throughout. Don't feel like you have to wait to the end, even though we will have a section for that. As questions pop up, shoot them in the Q&A, and I will stop Chris when it makes sense, and we can get those questions answered. So getting into it, initially, Chris, for professionals who are stepping into the job market, what kind of edge does a polished resume, strong interview presence, networking strategy, etc., give them compared to winging it?
Sure. So, ultimately, a strong foundation with a lot of different elements beyond the resume interview prep. It makes you more than one dimensional. If you're just relying on the resume only or quick apply stuff, you're missing critical opportunities to have the right conversations with the right decision makers. So, certainly, from a strong professional summary or your elevator pitch in terms of how you're going to tailor yourself and select qualifications to a particular role to then how you pull that through in your resume and cover letter, but also keeping in mind references and LinkedIn endorsements. Like when I graduated or when I was initiated, I feel like the move was go Facebook friend everyone in the chapter. But now you should be doing that for LinkedIn, building out your skill sets, building out that presence. If someone gets your resume, they're probably going to your LinkedIn first. And then when it comes to networking and interview strategy, like a lot of jobs that are posted aren't open, and a lot of jobs that will be opening up aren't posted. And so having those conversations at career fairs through LinkedIn with hiring managers or people that might help you get your foot in the door at a particular company, just incredibly helpful in terms of the side door or back door. And then interview strategy and frameworks. Like you might be really good at explaining your experience, but are you interviewing the interviewer as seriously and vetting them the way they're vetting you? I think one thing that's changed a lot since I graduated is the advent of applicant tracking systems or ATS. And so these are the first kind of first line digital gatekeepers that your resume or what you're doing, you're writing for software that's going to score you first before you even get to a human. And then if you get to a human, only 20% are spending more than 3 minutes with your resume. Closer to 60% are only spending 1 to 3. So if you're just relying on the resume and not these other elements, you're really missing out on opportunities to really tailor your value proposition, but also find other ways into the door from individuals who can help you. Um, and so just to take that a little bit further, um, collectively, all of these pieces give your candidacy narrative. It enables you to articulate the value and impact more than just being disconnected bullets on a resume. A resume is a really dense document, so that professional summary or the cover letter really lets you focus on the 2 to 3 things that matter most. Any job, especially your first out of school, should be a major stepping stone to advance your career. So if you're not presenting your best self or interviewing with intention, you could quickly end up being passed over for good opportunities, get that dreadful auto reject, or even worse, end up in a role that's not going to propel you forward or set you up for success. So having those networking conversations, you can get not everyone gives you feedback after an interview where you don't get a job. So some of those networking and virtual conversations can help identify gaps that you can then go proactively address. And as I said before, there's a disconnect between what's open and what's available. And so if you're not putting yourself out there, um, it's hard to sort of be considered or top of mind when something does open up. And like I said, interviewing with intentions more than just having a plan of how you're going to sell yourself, but how are you inquiring about the role itself, the growth and development opportunities, the team. And so you want to make sure it's just as much of a fit for you as it is for them. An example I'll use is when I graduated. There were a lot of quote unquote marketing jobs that were really just outsourced sales. And so I'd end up at an interview where there are like 10 other people all doing the same thing at once. And, it's not always sold the way it should be. And so are you being as critical will really help. Sometimes it's better to walk away from the wrong opportunity than continue on. And so that polished you as professional you and that multidimensional aspect really helps give you that early edge.
Absolutely. As you've been working with, I know you've been working with a lot of young professionals. What are some of the most common challenges you see them facing in the current job landscape?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different ones. So I would say starting with not using a professional summary at the top of the resume. So that really serves as an umbrella statement that brings together the collective experience in your professional self. So how does that set the tone for everything that follows? Again, resume dense document, but how do you focus in on, I'm a major, I'm this year in school, my coursework or past experience includes this, and this is what I'm trying to achieve. Going back to applicant tracking systems, and we'll get into a little bit more of that later, but you're really writing for software first versus people second. We'll get into a little bit of resume formats, but sometimes it feels like someone's overthinking the resume a little bit more on layout than the quantification of their accomplishments. And that can come back to bite you with the systems and software. Being too reliant on quick apply options. Again, if you're not tailoring, you're sort of missing an opportunity because those applicant tracking systems are scoring you against, relevance to the job description. So unlike, any conversation with a boss or professor, someone's not speaking for the sake of speaking. So there's a particular reason certain language is finding its way into a job description, and you should be taking the time to pull that through as naturally as you can into your resume as well. I think cover letters are kind of a lost art at this point, and so it's another way to draw your, 2 to 3 most relevant pieces of background or highlight a referral. They're not scored in ATS the same way as a resume. So again, it gives you more ammunition to give narrative to your candidacy, who you are, what you're passionate about, what you're motivated by, and how the collective experience has led to this opportunity, this role. Um, and then going back to LinkedIn a little bit. So again, everyone should be connecting with their brothers, posting, different skill sets, and then endorsing one another for those. Like when I joined Pike in 2004 and graduated in 2006, LinkedIn was barely a thing yet. It was still quote unquote Facebook for business, and who knows what was going to come of it. But now it should be one of those first line opportunities to virtually network to build your connections. And I'll say, as someone who's been a hiring manager, recruiting, if I'm plugging into LinkedIn, I need someone in this region with these skills. And then I go land on someone's Facebook profile, but their last, activity was 8 months ago. Is that someone who's even going to respond if I reach out? So I know LinkedIn can be intimidating sometimes, but even just posts or comments or likes, shares, they are just ways to one, show you're active, that you're engaged, that you have a particular perspective, but also that you're active and will actually see a DM if someone were to reach out.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Moving into, I guess, the meat of our presentation here, where does someone start knowing all of this and with all of the different challenges that they're facing? Where should someone start?
So starting with like job boards, then we can go into like resumes, ATS, interviewing, and virtual networking. But LinkedIn and Indeed are the two that I've personally used most, both as an applicant and as an employer recruiter. Glassdoor and ZipRecruiter have certainly kind of stepped up their game as additional options, and sometimes they may have more localized roles. If someone's, I went to school in DC, and so there were a lot of individuals focused on government jobs. And so USA jobs is more of a government specific role. So I think these are probably the most credible places to start. But if you're seeing something posted by a particular company, I would say go to their website and apply directly as opposed to LinkedIn. It just removes one level of gatekeeping from your resume or application being seen or noticed. Beyond that, when we're looking at resumes, so I've got two samples here, the simple format on the left and maybe a more modern or aesthetically pleasing version on the right. But when we're thinking about applicant tracking systems and the software, they don't really know how to read columns. So they're indiscriminately most of the time reading left to right. So you could spend a lot of time on the right hand, modern, more aesthetically pleasing one, but your skills or your education, when that software is parsing the data, it's mixing it in with your accomplishments. And so whoever is ultimately scoring and reading it on the back end is now just seeing a jumbled mess. And so for all the time that you've spent making this pretty, you've kind of done a disservice to making your accomplishments more complicated to understand. And so to bring that to life just a little bit more, here's your resume as you see it, neatly formatted, clean bullets. But ultimately, this is what ATS sees it as. It's extracting particular text, scanning for specific keywords, and then it's applying a score to that. So approximately 70 to 75% will just get rejected automatically and never make it to a human. And so the more you can take elements from the job description, those skills or qualifications, and weed them in naturally, the better you'll be, the higher you'll score, and the more likely you'll progress to a human. So real quick, some do's and don'ts and sort of elements to keep in mind. Try to take 5 to 7 key phrases from the job description, incorporate them naturally. The more you can quantify metrics or impact, the better. Keep in mind the standard section headers, professional experience, skills, education. Use bullet points and avoid too many columns. Some ways to sort of bring it to life down at the bottom. So instead of managed social media campaigns, you drove a 35% increase in social engagement. Coordinated marketing events, instead focus on how many events. So you orchestrated 12, you generated X amount in pipeline value or philanthropic contributions. And it's more than just assisted with content creation. It's authored content viewed 25,000 times monthly or something that was downloaded X amount. So if it's reading like a task list, you're not really giving yourself the accomplishment and the impact. And sometimes it might seem like you're at the bottom of the totem pole. You might be a cashier at a part-time job, but you are, responsible for X number of financial transactions or reconciliation, inventory management. So even if you're just doing basic research as an intern, that information that you are aggregating, uncovering, that's helping someone above you make the right strategic decision on how to move forward. So don't lose sight of, it might seem like a bland task to you, but in the aggregate, in the bigger picture, what is it enabling the company to do or how the team can lead? When we think about interviews, there are two particular frameworks that are really helpful to think through, and one is called START and one is called SOAR. They're really helpful when thinking about different behavior or skill questions, but they provide context around situations, tasks you undertook or obstacles you faced, the action you took because of that, the result you achieved, and then in the case of START, what the takeaway or learning was and how you can apply that in the role you're interviewing. So ultimately, it gives you a framework on how to demonstrate self-awareness, emotional intelligence, the ability to be coached and learn. And so we'll go through, one example. But tell me about a time you had to meet a tight deadline. And actually, before I get into this, I'll take a step back and say, think about your entire professional career being like repeating the most painful college project you've ever had over and over again. There's always going to be someone who's like late on slides or not doing enough, but wants the same grade. And so a lot of this helps provide context around your interpersonal skills, how you collaborate, problem solve. So using this kind of example of tell me about a time you had to meet a tight deadline. One generalized answer would be, yeah, deadlines are part of the job. I prioritize my work, I stay on track, and I usually get everything done. Fine, but what's the situation? What are you learning and how are you applying that? So using the START framework, the situation is at a previous role, we were launching a new product. We had to prepare training materials in 2 weeks, much shorter than usual. Your task was being responsible for creating an onboarding guide for the customer service team. The action you took was you mapped out a schedule, you collaborated with others. Yeah, you worked late a couple nights to complete it on time, but as a result, you launched successfully, you received positive feedback. And the takeaway is you understand that this role is going to involve fast-paced projects, shifting priorities. And so here's a firm anecdote, an example of how you've navigated situations like that you can apply to the role. And so ultimately, it's that self-awareness. How do you recognize where things have worked or maybe didn't work? And then how you can apply that to something in the future, whether that's how you lead it, you prioritize things, or delegate to others within the team. And then going beyond that to a point we made earlier, like, are you interviewing the interviewer the same way that they're interviewing you? And so I've included a few different categories here. We're not going to go through all of them, but if you think about the role, goals and expectations, the team and culture, as well as leadership and growth and development, if the average interview process is 4 interviews and you get in 2 or 3 of these per interview, ultimately that's going to get you where you need to go and give you a lot of insight. And sometimes their body language and response may tell you more than the words coming out of their mouth. So, like, for example, with the role, what created the need to fill this position? Was the last person promoted internally? Were they fired or let go? If so, why? What are the skills required to succeed? Looking forward, what are the biggest challenges that I will solve in this role, and how will that performance be measured? In terms of the team, what are the different responsibilities? And then whether it's a one-on-one interview or a group, it'll allow you to tailor your questions. How would we be working together day to day? Or what does an average day look like? Where would I need to collaborate outside the team? And how will you help me understand the politics or how to navigate that? And ultimately, that first job is really setting you up for success, or it should be. And so, how are they going to supplement the skills you're bringing? No one's going to expect you to have all the answers, but how are they equipping you to think through different challenges, whether that's supplementing skill sets, or even onboarding you? Will it be fully entrenched and immersive, or hey, here's some links to the drive, good luck? So thinking through these in particular will help you get a sense of, will you be supported? Will you grow in the role? Or are you just going to churn and burn like the last candidate? But beyond that, a few that I like to hone in on a little bit, in particular, are one, when it comes to salary. For example, ask this up front with a hiring manager or HR rep, but you've probably seen different roles that have a very wide salary band. And so I would, immediately start out, what's the difference between a $40,000 candidate and a $60,000 candidate? And then keep that response in mind, whether that's characteristics or accomplishments. You can then sprinkle those into your subsequent interviews. And then when an offer comes, hopefully use that to your advantage. So, hey, I heard you say that a $60,000 candidate demonstrated X, and I believe I've done that. So could we maybe up the offer to the higher end of the salary band? Same thing with onboarding and training. How are they going to set you up for success? Will you be on an island? How are they going to equip you with new skills that you obviously don't have quite yet, but investing in your future? From a qualifications or fit perspective, a good question to end an interview on maybe, do you have any hesitations or other hangups about my qualifications or experience. One, it helps you proactively uncover any remaining concerns that you can address either there in the interview itself or follow up in your thank you email with, hey, I heard you say this. I want to just take a moment to address those concerns. And here's another area where I hopefully can demonstrate that for you. But it also plays into someone's going to remember the last thing that they hear. So just a way to uncover proactively at the end and address those concerns. And then certainly work-life balance is important, but be careful on how you frame it. Sometimes leading right away with work-life balance can feel like you're hedging. And so I'll say from my own career, I've learned more between the hours of 5 and 9 than 9 to 5, but you need to be open to it. But think about it as work-life integration. Sometimes you're going to have to come in early or stay late or maybe work a weekend, but how do they give that time back to you? So if you're coming in early, can you leave early? If you are working on a weekend, can you get a comp day, a Wednesday or so, sometime after the project's due when things are a little bit slower. So you want to make sure that there's the give and take where you're willing to go a little bit above and beyond, but how do they give that time back to you? Another area is just kind of virtual networking. And so whether something I like to remind people of is yes, college is 4 years, but it's really like 2.5 year job program, or but depending upon your major, you might be applying for an internship a year out. And so whether it's at a career fair, trying to understand your experience or reaching out via LinkedIn, as a freshman or sophomore, trying to position yourself for that internship junior, senior year. Um, Virtual networking, it's awkward. It can feel transactional at times. But keep in mind, you might be low end of the totem pole now, but in a few years, you and your peers will be the decision makers. So, build those relationships, keep them open. And it's always easy to start with a tailored intro, going back to your elevator pitch or a little bit, or something that you've seen them post about, or a recent company announcement. Finding ways to easily make it about them. Play to their ego slightly, seeking your guidance. Really appreciate something that you might be able to share about your experience at a company that someone might not know. And then lead with a follow-up or, easy question that helps you build rapport without pressure. After that, it makes it a little bit easier to get to a call that hopefully a referral can happen. And even if it doesn't, keep the relationship alive. I can't tell you how many times I've been, that first loser coming in second for a job, but I'm top of mind the next time something comes up shortly after. So just relationships are meant to be cultivated. And so hopefully this helps keep it less transactional. But here's a quick script, I'm exploring roles at a company and would greatly appreciate your perspective. Would you be open to connecting? And then sort of what is something about your experience that you wish you knew before applying or people should understand? So again, easy follow-ups that play to their expertise, unique perspective without, hey, can you refer me? But ultimately, someone in their shoes should remember what it's like to be that person out of school and what it was to get their first break. And you can tailor this, as Pike alums. Hey, I saw you're a member of this chapter and we're in the same industry. We'd love to understand how Pike helped get you there. But try to have that virtual coffee, 15, 20 minutes, no pressure, and then thank them for their time. Their insights have been helpful, and remind them what you're exploring. From where they're sitting, do they think your background makes sense? Is there something missing that you can focus on to bolster that for yourself? And if they say yes, how would they, maybe get you on the hiring manager's radar? It helps put them in problem solving mode as opposed to a transactional partner. And if they don't mention the referral, maybe there's someone else. So maybe they know someone on the team directly, but not the hiring manager. And so it's a little bit more natural for them to just create that secondary conversation. So it may take 2 or 3 steps, but at least this way feels natural and hopefully removes some of the intimidation that one might feel when starting out from scratch in terms of how to engage their network or build those conversations.
Awesome. Before we get to the last piece of advice, we're coming up on 30 minutes here. If anyone has any questions they'd want to throw at Chris, feel free to throw those in the Q&A feature, and I can pass them over. And while some people are thinking, a question that I've gotten a lot, Chris, is with the questions you were talking about earlier in the interview, the situational questions. What should someone who's maybe a newer graduate or doesn't have a lot of work experience do when they're posed with a question that they may not have a scenario they can pull from? Like, I feel like it's tight deadline one doesn't apply because everyone's faced deadlines, but maybe it's a question regarding dealing with a difficult teammate or something that's a little bit more niche that they haven't dealt with. How would you suggest they handle a situation like that?
Yeah, I think certainly when it comes to personality clashes, I think there's elements of your own personal life. Or we'll get into Pike stuff as well, but I think there's always a time you've maybe disagreed. It might not be in a professional setting or academic setting, but I think it plays to your emotional intelligence. So what effort did you take to understand the perspective of that person or what is shaping that belief? And then trying to find that lowest common denominator or shared value that allows you to work collaboratively towards the same objective from
Mhm.
different mindsets. I think it's listen, we both want the best for the team or ourselves. And so I think having that empathetic nature or shared understanding of, listen, we might disagree on how to get there, but we agree on the end goal. And so I think
Yeah.
elements like that, the more you self-assess, it could be, a family matter, it could be, academic. So I would say don't discredit your experience if it's not necessarily always professional in nature, but ultimately organizations want to know, can you problem solve? Can you collaborate with those who may feel differently? And then just ultimately, I think it comes down to how do you demonstrate you're someone that someone wants to work with? Those first couple interviews are really, are you a good fit? Are you client facing? They're very interpersonal focused as opposed to skills. And then I think interviews 3 and 4 become, all right, now, show us your technical expertise that you can walk the walk and talk the talk. So I think ultimately it's, are you emotionally aware? Do you understand kind of thought processes and engage people in non-confrontational, productive ways?
Gotcha. Another question that I've gotten is with the you mentioned a cover letter being something a lot of people have skipped in the past. With someone who's maybe trying to apply to a lot of different roles, their resume feels a little bit more evergreen, maybe that they can just upload that for a cover letter that's a little bit more personalized. How do you find that balance between writing a bunch and not spending too much time that you're maybe wasting opportunities or not being able to apply to as many roles?
Yeah, I think it's a delicate balance. I think if you have a good professional summary at the top of your resume that sort of helps connect the dots a little bit, that really becomes the second paragraph of the cover letter. So it really quickly becomes, hi, dear hiring manager, I'm really interested in XYZ role. I'm a major at this school studying X. And then the professional summary can kind of connect some of those dots of your passion, your interests, a way to just say, this is more than a job. These are the motivating factors of the passion that makes me, get out of bed in the morning and want to do something like this. And then really just close with a thank you for your consideration. If there's more than I can address, look forward to, an interview or an opportunity to connect. So it can feel intimidating, but I think it's really just rounding it out with, I'm interested in this role. Here's how I found it. Here's what drives me. The professional summary that you're already using on the resume gets pasted over, and then it's a thank you for your consideration. So I think it's easy to overthink it, but when you kind of plot it out like that, it becomes really more templatized, and less intimidating, hopefully, to pull together or customize every time.
Awesome. Thank you for those answers there. What last piece of advice do you have for anyone that's watching this?
Sure. So, um, bringing it back to the Pike experience, and so keep in mind, everyone who's on this, wherever you've sat within your chapter, um, I think what we don't appreciate enough is you're basically running a corporate franchise on your local campus. You're entrusted with the growth, the finances, programming, legacy, culture, standards impact, as well as discipline and reputation. And so whether you're an e-board member, a committee head, or just a general member aspiring into leadership, your role is helping leave something better than you found it, grow it in the right way, and serve as a recruitment tool. And so going almost like, role by role in some ways. But if you're, the president or e-board, right? Like you're navigating guidance from corporate, you're balancing fraternity sorority life affairs and those contacts, as well as the organizational individual interests. So you're trying to ensure equitable growth and development. I think as a treasurer, you are so focused on dues collection, but also how that gets dispersed. I think in a big way, to reduce some of the intimidation or stigma of those you're interviewing with, I would say very few people have managed programming with any frequency or regularity for the same number of people, or had to deal with as many different personality clashes or difference in thought, let alone manage budgets of any significance. If you're a committee head, philanthropy, social, you are that external face of the organization. You're navigating contract negotiations, you're identifying vendors, you are doing event logistics. So, all things that play to what you're going to have to do in terms of soft skills in any particular role. But I can guarantee you, most of the people you're interviewing with haven't had that same requirements or needs to fill. As a recruitment chair, or even a member supporting that. Like someone might be hiring for an intern role here or there, but you're what, interviewing 20, 30 guys, picking the best and bringing them on and then onboarding them. So don't lose sight of those contributions, how they mirror what you would be doing in any kind of organization from a vetting potential members. It's like making a hiring decision. Does this person going to share our values? Are they going to pay their bills? Are they going to get stuff done? Are they going to make us better? And so I think just reframing your experience in that sense, it will be helpful in terms of buffering your experience in the absence of other professional experience or coursework, but becomes more practical in the day to day that an employer is going to care about most.
Awesome. Jumping in real quick, we got a question from the audience. What are your thoughts on AI when creating a resume or job searching? How can you use it to your advantage, and what are the downsides?
So, I think you can sometimes like I don't think there's harm in some ways of asking ChatGPT to, you know, think of yourself as a hiring manager in this field and think through how you could tailor your accomplishments or bullets to for your resume into that. I think be careful in terms of how much you take that word for word or verbatim afterwards. So like Indeed has a great page on, here's a bunch of strong action verbs if you're trying to diversify your language. ChatGPT or another AI tool is not going to really be able to quantify your impact the same way, but it may, help ask questions of, hey, I've done X, I've raised this. Can you help me shape impactful bullets around it? Um, I saw something recently just in terms of the verb delve being like a key giveaway that something is AI. And it had to do with sort of what systems or LLMs in certain countries have been trained upon. So like delve is not something that we in the US are using very often. And so there can be a disconnect in terms of the language it feeds back based upon how and where it was trained. So it can definitely be a thought partner, but be careful how you pull it through. The second bigger watch out, I would say, is yes, there are online ATS tools that will score your resume and give you a preliminary, hey, you've scored 86% on this. That can be directionally helpful. I might sometimes use it as like if I'm doing a resume review someone and I just need to like help give them a score as a baseline. But the problem is it doesn't have part two of the equation. So it's not actually comparing your resume to the job description you're applying towards. And so it can give you this false sense of security in terms of, oh, yeah, I scored really well, but it's not actually matching it against anything. So it becomes a little bit of a, you're using the right verbs. We see you've quantified things. Those are directionally good, and here's a score. But I would say it's probably not going to get you more than 80, 85% of the way, if that, just because it doesn't have the job description to sort of, all right, here's where you pulled this through, pulled that through. So it's really only giving you half the story, but it can be deceivingly positive in terms of what it feeds back. So it can be a thought partner. Be careful that you're not over reliant. I know there's a lot of chatter on LinkedIn about, the overuse of the EM dash being a giveaway. If that is, then I'm screwed because I use it way too much. But I think making sure that at the end of the day, the language you're using sounds human, sounds natural, can pull through the job description. And so each of those tools can get you there, but be careful how reliant you become.
Awesome. I don't believe we have any more questions, and I think we covered everything we wanted to. Do you want to tell them where they can find you if they want help with individual resume reviews or anything to that nature?
Yeah, so we'll make this slide deck available afterwards, but my website is Early Career Development Coach or Early Career Development Coach at Gmail if you want to reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn. I've got my number here as well if you want to reach out. But however, I can be a resource to you individually or to your chapters as a whole in doing sessions like this, or even honing in on particular topics of interest. Happy to make myself available and help you all get that first right step and sell your best selves. So I hope this was valuable, and hopefully it's the start of something more.
Absolutely. And I want to give Chris another thank you for hosting this and taking some time out of his day to present to this. I think this is some really valuable content for not just students but young alumni or alumni who are making a career change. Like he said, the slide here will be available to everyone after the fact. We're going to be posting a link to this presentation on the Pike Network for people who weren't able to join live to watch. We're also going to be posting some more information about what other events or topics you want to hear from. So feel free to engage with those. Tell brothers in your chapter or other alumni that you know to engage with those so that we can put out more and more sessions that speak to our members' needs. So thanks again, Chris. Thanks to you all for all being here and have a great night.
Yeah, thanks for everyone for taking the time. Really appreciate it.